Hi, I'm Robbie Stewart, a student of paleontology, and we're here at the Canadian Museum of Nature's research collections talking about extinct elephants today. Like entelodonts and terror birds, elephants' ancestors started out small. Unlike entelodonts and terror birds, we actually have small animals related to elephants still running around alive today. Hyraxes are tiny, rabbit-sized creatures that live all across Africa, which share several adaptations in common with elephants and have genomes that prove their relationship. Even smaller living relatives of elephants are creatures called elephant shrews, which are so named because they both have long noses, but genetically they actually share a similar genome, and they're from the same family of animals, Afrotheria, which means beasts that live in Africa. Just like hippos and entelodonts, from these small animals, elephants began to radiate into bigger body sizes, reaching the pig size with creatures like Miratherium here. Here in Miratherium, you can already see the start of things that would make an elephant an elephant. You can see the beginning of tusks over here, down in the lower and the upper jaw. You can also see that this area here has attachment sites for a trunk. We think that in Miratherium, because the attachment sites aren't as developed as they were in other elephants, that it probably had a long lip, kind of like a tapir's trunk, rather than a long hose-like trunk we see in modern-day elephants. Miratherium here was actually adapted to live more like a hippo than an elephant, having several adaptations for being aquatic, like short and stubby legs and a rotund body that would have floated. This is because at the time that elephants were evolving, Africa was a much wetter and warmer continent than it is today. There was a sea called the Tethys Sea, which had existed since the age of the dinosaurs, that bordered on Africa, and this sea flooded into mangrove swamps that existed all throughout the coast of Egypt at this time and place. Miratherium existed to take advantage of these swamps. But creatures like Miratherium provide a glimpse into what was to come, with the shape of their tusks and the fact that they were already growing trunks like modern-day elephants. And of course, growing larger, which would happen even more quickly to even more species as time went on. As Africa began to cool, and those marshes from before turned into woodlands, animals like this Phiomia adapted. These creatures had longer legs than Miratherium did, and they're starting to develop more developed tusks at the same time, as well as longer snouts to facilitate a longer trunk. These animals would begin to look more like the elephants that we recognize and know today, living in the Oligocene period instead of the Eocene, but would be still small by our comparative understanding of elephants, being only about the size of a buffalo instead of elephant-sized. Elephants would then evolve from these animals into a variety of different giants who would all use the tusks that were growing out of their jaws in different ways for different feeding strategies. At this point in their evolutionary history, all elephants had 4 tusks, 2 on the lower jaw and 2 on the upper jaw, like they have in modern elephants. But all these elephant species started to use their tusks to feed themselves in different ways. These ambelodontids would use long, flat tusks growing out of their skulls, which they could use to shovel up plant vegetation. This led to their name, shovel tuskers. Originally, it was thought that ambelodontids would only eat marsh vegetation, which they would scoop up using their shovel tusks. But in the modern day, this has since been reassessed. Patterns of wear and tear on these tusks have been identified that correlate with branches, grasses, and leaves, suggesting that they might have had a more varied diet. Scientists think they might have used their teeth like tweezers in a moose skull, which are used for snipping and crunching up branches, something that these molars in the back of the skull would have been excellent at processing. And relatives of Ambelodon, called Platybelodon, living in China, might have even used their tusks like scythes. Originally, these animals were portrayed as having trunks that ended at the tusks, creating a long, wide, rubbery lip, but not a proper trunk. Recently, however, scientists have found attachment sites on these animals that correlate to them having proper trunks instead of just these rubbery lips. However it was they ate, and whatever their trunks and tusks might have looked like, these animals were extremely successful, spreading all across Africa, Europe, Asia, and into here in North America. These embelodons were actually taken from North America. Although they were very successful, these animals didn't end up making it to the modern age of elephants, going extinct during the Pliocene period at its very start after evolving in the Oligocene. There were, however, some very strange tusked elephants with lower tusks in their bottom jaws that did manage to survive into the age of modern elephants, the Dinotherians, which we will be looking at next. Other elephants with tusks on their lower jaw evolved these strange downward sloping curves on their tusks. These animals are called Dinotheridae, the Dinotherium family. And this is Dinotherium itself. Scientists believe that they would have used these tusks to help them in browsing. Dinotheres had long, tall, stiff legs, and they could have grown up to 2 stories tall, towering over most animals alive at the time, being some of the first truly gigantic elephants to evolve. These animals are thought to have browsed on branches, trees, fruits, and other similar foods because their teeth show wear patterns that are similar to tapirs, animals alive today that also focus on eating tree branches, leaves, flowers, fruits, things that grow on trees. In modern-day Africa, giraffes actually have long, rubbery tongues that have very thick skin to them, which they use to do the exact same thing, pulling branches closer to their face so that they can eat them without hurting their mouths on the thorns. How long the trunks of Dinotheriums were is a point of debate. On the one hand, their skulls suggest that their trunks might be shorter because of the shape of the attachment sites, which is more similar to modern-day tapirs than it is to extinct elephants. However, Dinotheres had extremely stiff knees, which means that bending would have been very difficult for them. So scientists wonder how they would have been able to drink water. In addition, despite being a browsing animal that ate branches, tree fruit, and flowers, it's very strange. Dinotheres had a sloping back to them. Their shoulders had them hunching downwards. This suggests that if they were eating the types of branches that they were, a longer trunk would have helped them reach the highest branches. Thus, it's a point of contention as to how long the trunks of Dinotheres actually were. They might have waded into the water to drink with a shorter trunk, or they might have had a longer trunk which would have helped them to obtain water and forage for food, but doesn't really fit with the way that the muscles seem to have been attached to the top of the skull. Although the Dinothere family didn't have many genera, genuses, they did live a very, very long time, existing from the mid-Miocene all the way to the very first of the ice ages in the early Pleistocene. It wouldn't be until the much colder later ice ages, such as the last ice age, that these animals finally started going extinct. That means that we were very, very close to having strange chin-strapped elephants living alongside us in the modern day. By the time of the last ice age, the 4-tusked elephants had all but vanished, leaving only elephants that had 2 tusks on the top of their skull rather than the 4 tusks on the bottom and top that we've seen before. These 2-tusked elephants are the kind that we still have today, and this Columbian mammoth was one of these elephants. These 2-tusked elephants made up for their lack of tusks by modifying them to be gigantic. These elephants didn't use their tusks for feeding, but instead for fighting in combat with mates and defending themselves from predators. There's actually 2 Columbian mammoth skulls from Nebraska that are so interlocked that they're still not pulled apart to this day, the animals having starved to death, locked in combat thousands of years ago, and even now, to this very day, still not being separated. When they weren't starving to death locked in territorial combat with one another, Columbian mammoths had a varied diet, unlike their more specialized cousins the Dinotheres, who went extinct during the Ice Age. Columbian mammoths would have eaten grasses, branches, fruits, even pine needles, and they even would have used their curved tusks to help them dig up roots, which caused a unique wearing and smoothing pattern on the underside of their tusks that you can actually see right here. Columbian mammoths would have used their long, modern elephant trunks to help them pull up grasses, pluck branches, and eat any of the many things that they've been found to feed upon. We know that Columbian mammoths ate so many different kinds of things because we've found fossilized plants inside their chest cavity that were in the process of being digested. And we've also found Columbian mammoth droppings in places in Utah. The caves where these have been discovered actually are named after the Navajo word for giant dung. Columbian mammoths would have grown as tall as 13 feet at the shoulder, and these tusks could have been as long as the animal was tall, at a 13-foot-long tusk. They would have been incredible to see in real life, and there's some depictions of them that still survive to this day. These animals were extremely modern, and they would have gone extinct only about 13,000 years ago. Why they went extinct isn't entirely clear. It's thought that early humans may have hunted them, but they also coexisted with humans for about 20,000 years before that. Perhaps earlier humans developed more modern hunting strategies, perhaps the combination of both the changing climate and human hunting was too much for them, or perhaps they simply couldn't adapt to the climates themselves and the sudden drying and warming spell was too much for these animals to handle. Whatever combination of factors, modern-day elephants are in danger pretty much exclusively from humans. Habitat loss, poaching, poisoning elephants in order to prevent them from trampling crops. Elephants in the modern day are frequently persecuted by humans. And if we aren't careful, the elephants that we do have will soon join their extinct brethren as a product of the past. Part of the secret to how they were able to eat so many different types of plants is that they had these special molars which would actually grow up out of their skulls as they aged. This way, as the tooth was worn down grinding down plant material, more of it would be exposed, so they wouldn't actually lose the tooth or its ability to chew food as they grew older. Although Columbian mammoths were very generalist animals, they mostly lived in grassland habitats, which was why they had these thin rows of flat teeth which were better suited to chomping up blades of grass. Mastodons, close relatives of mammoths, lived in more forested areas, and they had these peg-shaped teeth that would have been better for crunching on branches. See how they're very similar to the teeth in the skulls of Embelodon and Dinotherium, which also fed upon branches. Mastodons also had straight tusks, or straighter than mammoths did. Mammoths had curled tusks, which would have been, again, better for fighting with mates because they were easier to interlock, but they would have been a cumbersome and difficult thing to move around forests. Mastodons, by contrast, had more pointed tusks that would have been easier to move through the trees.